For those of you joining in, I'm going to wait just a couple more minutes to get us rolling, just in case we have anyone still trying to join in. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get rolling to kind of keep us on track and on schedule this evening. Thanks to everybody for joining in. You are part of the virtual open house for the recreation visioning process for the Placid Lake area. And just a couple quick things before we dive into this is just a few technical pieces. So if you guys are used to attending Zoom meetings, which I think a lot of us are by this point, this might look a little different if you haven't been part of what's called a Zoom webinar. So you'll notice that some of the functionality, if you're here as an attendee for the meeting, that you might be used to from some regular Zoom meetings is not there. So things that you will see that are really important to note is at the bottom of your screen, there should be a menu bar that pops up. And if it's not there right away, if you hover your mouse over the bottom of your screen, it should pop up there. There's a couple functions that you may want to use quite a bit this evening that are really handy. One is to raise your hand, and then we can see that your hand is raised, and when there's a good moment to address your question or input or whatever along the way, we'll call on you, and then you'll be able to, then you'll be unmuted. So it feels like you won't have that opportunity, but you will. It usually works pretty well. There's also a Q&A at the bottom of the screen that's kind of handy if you have a note you want to jot or a question you want to jot along the way. You can type it in there and we may answer it as we go if we can. Otherwise, it'll just be a good reminder to us to address that question. So the Q&A, the raise hand are really handy. It looks like we have everybody joining either by some sort of device, not just a regular phone, but if I'm wrong and there's somebody on the phone, you can also raise your hand by hitting *9 on your phone. So that'll show us that you have a question that way as well. If anybody has any technical issues right now, feel free to raise your hand with any of those questions or to jot that down in the Q&A. And you might have noticed that the meeting is being recorded. And so just so you're aware, and the benefit of that is that we'll be able to post this as well as another information piece that'll live on the webpage where we're posting information for this process. So just know that. And with that, I'm going to start with introductions. The folks that you see on the screen here are all part of either Fish, Wildlife, and Parks or the Nature Conservancy that are working on this project. And my name is Vivica Krauser. I work for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks out of the Missoula office doing the public information and education work. And then I'm gonna pick on people here. So let's start with Steve, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thanks, Vivica. Hello, I'm Stephen Kletzel, based out of Ovando. And for the last 18 years, I've been the land manager for the Nature Conservancy in Western Montana. Welcome.
I'll just go ahead and jump in if Vivica doesn't mind. Ryan Sokolowski, I'm the park manager for Placid Lake State Park. I've been here for 10 years now, a park manager for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for about 20.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for jumping in. Sorry, I got distracted promoting somebody to a panelist to the meeting. Thanks for covering for me there. Chris.
Yeah, hey, this is Chris Bryan. I'm with the Nature Conservancy, work with Steve in helping to manage some of that old Plum Creek ground that we've acquired over the years. And happy to be here. Don't know who's out there, but it's nice to talk to the gaping maw of the internet.
All right, and Lauren.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lauren Flynn. I'm the Regional Recreation Manager for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for the Missoula area.
Kristen?
Hi, yes. I apologize. I don't have video on this computer, but I am the landscape architect and I am part of the Design and Construction Bureau for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
Great. And I just mentioned for the benefit of the panelists too, there should be a little menu bar that you can look at so you can see who our attendees are, which will help you see who has a hand raised too. So if you don't have that pulled up there, we've got 8 folks in attendance right now. So again, thanks for joining us. And then our last introduction, I hope I didn't miss anybody else, but is Hope. And I'm going to turn it over to Hope for her introduction and then kind of a welcome as well.
Sure. Thanks, Vivica. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Zoom webinar for our visioning with Placid Lake State Park. We really appreciate your participation this evening. My name is Hope Stockwell. I'm the administrator of the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Division at Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. It's a new division in the agency that we've been getting stood up over the last 8 months or so, since I've been on board in September 1st anyway. And it's a very exciting time, but State Parks falls under the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Division. I'm standing in tonight for Randy Arnold, the Region 2 supervisor who couldn't be with us this evening, but he extends his appreciation for your being here this evening, as do I. It's so important to have this touch point for us early in the process with folks such as yourself. And to talk a little bit about what we're doing here, we're undertaking a visioning process around Placid Lake as Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, but also in partnership with the Nature Conservancy, which has quite a few acres of adjacent land around the park and the lake itself, which is also home to homeowners. There's a lot of activity in that area, a lot of interest. The history there is deep. It's an important location to our First Nations. And more recently for lakeside homeowners, and then the thousands of visitors who come and stay and recreate in the area each year. But interest in Placid has steadily increased, which will probably come as no surprise to anyone in this call because you've joined, likely because your heart is at Placid in one way or another. And so you may have noticed that there's increased congestion in the day use area or within the park itself or at the boat ramp. Some peak days in the summer, the boat launch parking overflows out onto the county road. And we see on the Nature Conservancy lands that are adjacent to us, we see dispersed camping happening and other recreation. And we've both noticed as land managers between our agency and TNC, what we call the Nature Conservancy for short, how those increased uses are starting to impact the resources. And it's our role as the resource managers to stay ahead of that curve as best we can. Now, of course, the past couple of seasons have been seasons like we could not have predicted across the state for recreation. But in that regard, we still want to get ahead as best we can of impacts from increased use, also providing the best opportunity and experience possible at our sites for FWP. It's a balance we're trying to strike, protecting the resource so it's there for future generations. It's so important, but also providing great recreational opportunities. And so we invite you into that conversation tonight for Placid Lake. We have been discussing amongst ourselves as agencies, as organizations, whether and how the resource at Placid and the surrounding area might benefit from a shift in current offerings and use. And so we have some initial ideas that we want to bring to you this evening to hear your thoughts about them, to get some initial feedback, but also because you might have a better understanding or maybe a different understanding of what's going on in these areas at these sites that would be really informative for us to take into consideration and think about. And so you might have some new ideas we haven't thought of about how impacts could be addressed. So we are open to hearing your thoughts and comments tonight. Having this input is really going to help us at the early stage of this develop a better overall product in the end. So please be free with your comments. Today, we're going to be discussing the areas and initial ideas that we have identified to give you some food for thought and discuss the uses that we're seeing and those impacts. And we want to hear your feedback. We will take good notes tonight, but this is not going to be a formal public comment period this evening. It is an opportunity really to share information with you and maybe answer some questions that you have about it. But we would like you to formally submit any comments you might have through our website. The deadline for those comments will be the end of this month, and we will have details to share with you on that at the end of this evening's meeting. But just a heads up, be taking notes for yourself so you can formally share comments that will be incorporated in our public comment process that we're taking online. As we come out of this and that public comment process, just where we're headed by the end of midsummer, or pardon me, by midsummer, we expect to have assembled your comments, summarizing them along with some initial graphics and visuals for more site-specific items that might come forward. We want to bring that document back out once we've heard that feedback and sort of put together a baseline plan. Bring that back out for more public review and input. And at that stage, you would see more specific ideas to look at, more detail to review, have that out for comment, get another round of comment from you and others coming back for adjustments by us internally toward the end of summer. But the outcome that we're looking to get to is a vision or a strategy for the overall area of Placid Lake, not just our lands, but also for TNC's lands where recreation is occurring, public recreation. And so we want this vision, this strategy to be a tool that helps guide our work into the future and also can communicate that direction to the public, help identify the pieces that will move forward. It might be in a phased approach. Through this process, we could identify priorities to move forward with, et cetera. And so just looking to have any thoughts, questions you might have tonight to help us sort of shape our thinking. And again, direct you to submit any formal comments through our website. And again, we'll provide that information on how to do so at the end of the meeting today. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Bryant from TNC to give a bit of their perspective walking into this evening and this effort. And take it away, Chris.
Great. Thank you. And thanks, Vivica, for instructing on how to see who's participating, because now I can see a few names. I don't know, Lauren, do you want to throw that map up when you get a chance to share your screen? We have a few slides here, but first of all, I just want to thank, like we enter into this work with a partnership perspective. Obviously, we have partnerships we built that Steve and his team, along with Mike Shadell, our forester, myself, have built with the Placid Lake cabin owners, certainly with users of the area, with CSKT and discussing some of their interests in the area. So I want to just thank everybody for being involved in this, and thank the folks that live around the lake or others that are interested in this for spending some time with this. We can go to probably that slide 3. I'm not sure I don't think I need to read any of that. I think there probably is, it's probably worth going over that today we're going to be talking about a number of things that involve both the land that the Nature Conservancy manages that are beyond the park and kind of around the park, and then some areas within the park, including the Placid Lake State Park itself, and then the day use area, and then that road along Owl Creek, where if you look at the map there, you'll see some little green dots. Those are like existing campsites where we see a lot of camping in kind of that part of the world. So there's some opportunities here to talk about that take place on both of those ownerships, both the state managed ground and the Nature Conservancy managed ground, and those are going to be around improved interpretation and some opportunities for better outreach and education in that area. The treatment of the day use area, which Lauren's going to talk about here pretty soon. Impacts of dispersed camping on the park, which Ryan will talk about. That's sort of like that Owl Creek area has a big impact on the park, just with all of those folks camping, a lot of them visiting the park infrastructure. It's going to be some discussion of around the boat launch at the park. And then the part that we're really going to focus on at Nature Conservancy is going to be, I think, the dispersed camping along Owl Creek and what that looks like and kind of how we've been approaching that. So anybody who's on the call that is aware of driving back and forth on that road has seen a lot of use along Owl Creek. And over the last 6 years of the Nature Conservancy's ownership of this land and management of this ground, Steve has really been our point person, along with interns that we've worked with from the University of Montana and Montana Conservation Corps to help understand that a little bit. So I'm going to kick it over to him here. Might as well do that right now, unless there's any additions from Lauren on kind of the setup of what we're going to be talking about, or anybody else. Any questions we want to dive into before I kick it over to Steve to talk about kind of that dispersed use area along Owl Creek.
All quiet. So this is, yeah, thank you for zooming in there, Lauren. On my screen anyway, this map is very fuzzy. I hope for other people it's a little more legible. But so you could still see on this map in the upper sort of left corner is that FWP day use area. That is a part of this discussion from the FWP management perspective. And then right there on the east bay of the lake, you see Placid Lake State Park. And then essentially extending directly east from there is the Placid Lake Road and Owl Creek itself. And if you can make out, there's a whole range of closed camps, which are yellow circles, and then and closed roads, which are yellow roads. And then there are a bunch of little green circles, and those are the open camps. But really what we have there in particular is along Owl Creek is two concentrated group use areas that we inherited when we bought these lands from Plum Creek Timber Company 6 years ago. And those camps have been there for as long as anyone I've spoken to can remember. When we acquired these lands 6 years ago, we did, using some of those interns that Chris mentioned, we did map all of the recreational use along this corridor. We heard loud and clear from local people that the use was off the charts and was expanding rapidly. So we went in and assessed which camps we should keep and which ones we should close based upon resource impacts and impacts to the busyness of the site and the roads and what we could just manage. And so we downsized by about 50%. But as I said, there's an east and a west group camp area, and then a few scattered single green dots, which are usually, at little pullouts or at our gates. It's very common to have camps at those sites. And so this discussion really is how can we better manage that concentrated camping all along the Placid Lake Road or the Owl Creek corridor. We've done a few things in addition to downsizing and closing some of the problem sites and doing restoration there. We seasonally put porta potties out there to deal with the human waste management issue that we were having, and mostly Owl Creek itself was having. So we have between 2 and 5 porta potties out on the ground there seasonally, depending upon the time of year. And then we do have them, signed with our regulations. We have a very active agreement with Fish, Wildlife and Parks to help us manage all of our former Plum Creek timberlands through a biennial use agreement. So they enforce our land use policies. Things like camping is allowed for 16 days only, and then you have to move, and no resource damage, and clean up your litter, and store your food in a bear safe manner. That's called the food storage order. And those are things that are pretty much across all of the public lands and TNC lands in this area. They're pretty much unified management in those, in that regard. So I think that's enough about our history there, but I would just say that the neighborhood, the folks at Placid Lake have been great to work with. They've been very helpful, active neighbors. They've helped build this trail system out that you also see on this map, the Lakeview Trail and an All Abilities Loop Trail, to help serve the state park better, as well as the area residents. And they've gone out and cleaned up garbage at these camps and put out unattended campfires and all those sorts of things. But we can do better. And so this visioning effort is how can that be better managed out there?
Yeah, Chris, I might just add a couple things there to make sure, clarify, I guess, that the agreement that Fish, Wildlife and Parks and TNC have is for enforcement of those public use rules only. And so we do have enforcement authority for those rules on Nature Conservancy lands. And I know our enforcement folks, our wardens, spend a lot of time in those areas specifically that you were just talking about. And the bear storage or food storage order is a big one. And then I think the other thing to really acknowledge is that the Nature Conservancy is not a recreation management organization. That's, I think, a little bit outside your mission and certainly outside your comfort zone. And you've been doing what you can there, but there are some management tools that we could bring to bear from a recreation management standpoint that haven't been utilized yet, and that's through no one's fault. That's just that's not your bailiwick, and I think there's an opportunity to do some things, you said, Steve, do it better.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Lauren. That's exactly right. The Nature Conservancy is primarily a conservation organization. And we do have some recreation, but we do not have near the expertise that Fish, Wildlife and Parks has in managing this sort of intense use.
I think, Ryan, you were going to talk about the impacts of that use on the state park and the campground.
You bet. Okay, for those that don't know, we have 40 campsites in Placid Lake Campground and some hike and bike in sites and the day use area on the north end. That's where people are coming to recreate on and around Placid Lake. So this picture right here that you're seeing on your screen is taken at our day use area. Our day use area currently first, let me give you a couple other bits of information. Placid Lake State Park, all of the grounds, including the day use area, the campground, everything that we have is 30.9 acres. So just under 31 acres. We don't have a lot of space. At our current day use area, which is approximately 3 acres in size, we have enough parking for 8 vehicles, 9 if one of them is a handicap vehicle. We have one designated handicap spot. When that fills up, and by the way, 8 if they're parked correctly. So, and what I mean by that is if the first person that arrives at the day use area parks wrong or parks to where nobody can park next to them, but there's about 3/4 of a spot available. We've all seen it at a store, grocery store, the mall. We've all seen people do that. It'll cut back on our parking down to 5, 6, 7 vehicles, especially if one of those vehicles is a dually vehicle or a conversion van. So with the 8 vehicles that we have, when everybody's parked perfect at the day use area, this is what we get when people are coming. And there's no way for us to stop them. This is a mile up the road from the campground. And once they're out there on the road, it does become a large task to try to get them back off of the county road, because we don't have any place necessarily to have them park. And they become a bit of a road hazard when they see that. Obviously, the road isn't designed for people to be parking long-term on the shoulders. So that's what people are using. They're trying to make the best of the situation. Without us there, that's honestly that's about as good of a job as they can do, but it still presents a problem. It presents a management problem, a safety hazard. So we don't like that. And I was taking a picture here just to try to illustrate that this is what happens. And because this is a mile up the road, it almost turns into a never-ending task. There is a constant turnover. In other words, if this picture was taken at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, at noon, there may not have been any vehicles there. And 2 hours later at 4 p.m., there might not be anybody there, or there could be twice as many vehicles. So because we don't have any staff available to just be at the day use area, these are some of the challenging situations that we get. This also happens in the campground. Since I've been here, we've had vehicles that'll pull into a camp spot. Camp spots that are actually already taken, but maybe the people are out for the local people will understand. Maybe the people left Placid Lake Campground to go hike to Morel Falls, and they're up there for the day. Their campsite is empty. They have a tent in it, but somebody else pulls up and they want to go boating and they can't find any parking spots. So they'll pull right into a camping spot. If we're not there to catch them, we'll have the situation when the first family returns that somebody's in their campsite. So what this picture is just really illustrating is just that there's a lot of people that are coming and going from the park at all hours, at all times, and in all vehicles. This isn't bad. It does get quite a bit worse when some of those vehicles are dually vehicles, wide vehicles, or a vehicle where somebody isn't quite as willing to get off of the road as the next person. I am not sure what other pictures we have. Okay. Okay.
Hey, look, Ryan, could you talk a little bit about some of the impacts you're seeing on those dispersed campers in terms of like use of the comfort station, impacts to other campers, trash, things like that?
You bet. So at the park, we have, I'm trying to think of how to word this. We get about 60,000 visitors a year. We have 40 campsites. It's almost doubled when you incorporate the people on that Owl Creek corridor. There'll be easily that many in some instances, and some days even more than what we have in the park. So the park infrastructure, when it was designed for kind of the worst case scenario. So a gymnasium, when they talk about fire escapes, how can we get everybody evacuated in the worst case scenario out those doors? So in the worst case scenario, our infrastructure is our septic systems, our electrical systems, and our trash systems. Those are three that are really heavily worn upon by the influx of people on Owl Creek. So what's happening is they're coming into the park and they're doubling our use of our toilets, of our flush facilities. So our pumps are having to work twice as hard, twice as often, and address twice as much affluent. And I'm concerned that at some point, some of those infrastructures are going to reach their breaking point. And if you're in my experiences, Murphy's Law is that'll never happen on a really slow time at the end of the year. That when those systems fail, it's going to be when they're needed the most by the highest number of people. And my concern is it's going to happen on a late June, and that could be a system that takes some time to fix. That could be a month, that could be 2 or 3 months, depending upon, can we get somebody in here? Specifically things like the drain field, where all the affluent is pumped after it's treated in our septic system. It's pumped up. If the drain field becomes saturated, we would either have to dig it up or develop a new drain field system. And that's going to take some time. And if that happens in the summer, or if that happens, Placid Lake would effectively shut down. That's some of my concern. The trash services. Currently, the park is spending about a third of its budget, of the park operations budget. And that's the operations dollar that goes into purchasing toilet paper for the public, to mop heads, to leather gloves when we're pulling really thorny things, to just those basics. All of that is in one budget, and about a third of that budget is spent just on trash services. So they're coming in, and even though we have clearly marked on all of our dumpsters for campground use only, it's a privilege, or it's a resource or an opportunity that is overwhelmingly abused. We would almost have to put one staff member per dumpster just to prevent the illegal use of the trash receptacles. And so what's happening is people are dumping them. We're either having to call for more trash services, which we just don't have the budget for, or, and this is what is happening almost on a daily basis, is our staff, and in some days, it's even our volunteer campground hosts are having to get up on top of our dumpsters with a 45-pound camping bar and literally crush the garbage down to try to get more garbage to fit in that dumpster. And with the situation of hepatitis and all of those innumerable amount of diseases that, you know, people are throwing, whether they're needles, broken glass, all of that type of thing into the garbage, that's the only solution that we have that we can literally afford, is to do that. Even some people say, well, you just have the trash company come and get it. The trash company isn't always available to come up on a Tuesday. In some cases, they say, we won't be able to get back to you until you're back on the schedule, until your regular pickup time, because we are swamped. There just isn't enough drivers. So it's not an issue of more trash cans, necessarily more trash services or more dumpsters. More dumpsters, some of those do lead to more challenges and more problems. Actually, all of them do. We currently have 6 large dumpsters in the park, and that's actually more than what the trash services says. You know, they'll advise. In other words, you can call Republic Trash Services and say, if we've got 200 people that are going to be there for 1 week, how many trash cans should we have? They actually have a formula that they can tell you how much or how large of a trash can you should have and how often it should be picked up. We are already, I believe we're 1 away from being 50% or almost double, double than what they recommend or what they advise. And they do say certain things just produce more trash. Camping is one of those things. People produce more trash when they go camping. They're going to buy watermelons, Kentucky Fried Chicken on their way out of town, a pizza, and then we have boxes. People buy chairs, those types of things, and they'll get rid of, dispose of the wrapping material when they arrive to the park. So we're leaning on these park infrastructure with the septic, sanitation, even the water. We do have a well in the park. We test that water. It has to have a cistern and a pump, and people forget, and it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind, but we're trying to track that. And with the amount of water that we're using up, we're really going through a lot of water. All of these problems or all of these challenges that we're getting from the influx of people is something that we're trying to address now before we reach that critical point of failure.
Ryan, we have a couple of questions that have popped
Oh.
up in the Q&A here that might be worth trying to hit on quickly. One, and Marianne, you may need to clarify this for us just a bit, but we'll do our best. The maximum capacity for what is the maximum capacity for the day use campground, and how is that monitored? So there's the day use area separate from the campground, but then of course there's parking at the campground that does serve some day use for boating and such. So Ryan, would that be one you could
Yep,
address?
You
I
bet.
can handle the day use, Vivica, when I
Okay.
talk about that one next. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we'll hold that for a minute. And then the other was just specific to the trash. So we'll just hit that really quickly. Could you define illegal dumping that you were referring to?
Yes. So I'm assuming that it's one of two things. Illegal dumping for the trash services is what I'm guessing. We have the dumpsters in the park, and if you're a camper camping in the park, that's who the dumpsters are for. So cabin owners, Owl Creek users, day users to some degree would even be. So a person who comes in and goes out on a boat, that's their trash. They should be taking that with them. But a lot of times they'll produce a lot of pop cans, beer cans, food stuff when they're out on the boat, and then they'll stop and dump it. And that would be, we try to accommodate them as best we can, but it is not always possible. So if you come to the park in late May, early June, you will probably be allowed to get away with it. But if we catch you in July, we try to stop people.
If I could just add, upstream of Placid Lake itself, there's about 100,000 acres of Forest Service land. And I think word is out that the state park is, it's the first quasi-public dumpster and quasi-public shower and real restroom that you come to as you leave that huge area of, the Jocko Road country in Upper Placid. So I think it's compounded by, yes, it's Owl Creek, but it's also that huge area of Forest Service ground up behind Placid.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's a really good reminder. And I think just a point of clarification is that if someone generates trash off-site, we actually do have an administrative rule that it is illegal for them to then bring it into our site and dispose of it there. So if it's someone who is a day user to the park, certainly if they're generating trash while they're within the park, that's legit. But it's people that are dispersed camping, looking for a place to store their trash. And I get it because, we do have a food storage order. But that is a real challenge that we have. Any other thoughts there before we move on to the day use itself and talk a little bit about not only our challenges there, but how we might be able to improve that? All right, so you're going to have to put up with my really inadequate map making skills here. But here we have Placid Lake State Park, and the campground is there, as we pointed out, kind of on that east bay. And then that little tiny sliver of green up on the north end of the the northwest end of the lake there is our day use. That's about a mile to a mile and a half away from the park. And Ryan was already talking about how difficult it is for us to manage that. And just because we don't have a person there, and there's tremendous amount of turnover, but it's also the only place, we don't have a ton of really good space within the existing park campground for people who are looking for a place to go for a picnic, or to let their kids go for a swim or to wade, or to launch even a kayak or a stand-up paddleboard, a canoe onto the lake. And so that day use area gets a lot of use from people who are looking for that type of activity. And then, one of the questions was, what's the capacity? And we really don't have a capacity on either of those places. And that's something I think just in general, we're going to have a lot of conversations about, not around Placid Lake, but other places as well. We've seen this growing recreational use. I think it's been brought, a fine point has been put on it during the last couple of years during the pandemic. But those of us who work in recreation have been watching this for 10 or 15 years now. And it's been a steady climb that just exploded. And we all knew we were going to get to where we are now. We just thought it was 10 years away. But it's been on the horizon for those of us who've really been paying attention to it. So as I said, just kind of that difficulty of managing that remote site with limited staff that we have at Placid Lake State Park. Ryan manages 3 parks as well as some fishing access sites and a wildlife management area. And he's doing all of that with about 2 full-time and about 4 part-time people or seasonal people. And that's a big workload for people trying to manage these sites, especially places like Placid and Salmon, which are essentially like small cities. They have their own trash service and electrical and water and sewer. So one of the things that we've talked about is the possibility here is to relocate the day use area to within the existing footprint of the campground at Placid Lake State Park, or maybe the main part of Placid Lake State Park. So in that blue shaded area there, you can see that's undeveloped part of the park. But one of the things that we really like about that is, if you look at that aerial photo, you can almost see the difference in the depth of the water as it goes from the shoreline out into the lake. So it's very shallow for a very long time. We don't tend to get a lot of boats in there, or any boats in there, motor boats. So it's a great place for people who want to take their kids for a swim, or for go for a wade. If there was a little bit better access, you could potentially get your kayak or your canoe there to launch it. Something that didn't take a lot of water or have a big motor. And one of the things that we like about this place is there's an opportunity to do potentially like a natural amphitheater. So here's Kristen from our design and construction department kind of came up with just a really rough concept of what something like this could look like. And that would not only provide that day use opportunity for families and others looking for that option, but also really potentially provide a great spot for interpretive programs, education programs, outdoor presentations in a really cool kind of natural setting. Additionally, we could potentially take some of that day use parking capacity off of the county road through a smaller but actually developed parking lot, as well as providing latrine for people. And maybe instead of as they come down those from the Jocko Road or up out farther upstream there, they stop there rather than coming into the comfort station within the park. Again, just a concept, but it's one that we like, is in terms of just being able to accommodate the use that's occurring currently without even addressing any growth. And then that leads us to what we might be able to do at the existing day use area, which would continue to be public land. But if we were to move the day use area to within the larger main part of the park, one of our concepts is to provide what we're calling diversified lodging. If you go to a state park in almost any other state, things like yurts and wall tents and cabins and even lodges are fairly common in these other places. I don't think we need to do a lodge in Placid Lake, but the idea of 3 or 4 small cabin sites in that day use area is an option for us. There's already a vault latrine there. We probably wouldn't have to do much more than reconfigure the parking lot a little bit. What we could see there is a couple of things. One is that would provide us with a really high quality experience for someone who's looking for that. Our expectation is you wouldn't see someone, or not very many people would be renting that for a single night. You know, that would be a family vacation where they would come with their family of 4 or 5 and spend several days or a week. The other nice thing potentially about that is that it could accommodate use beyond just the summer season for people who are coming to go cross-country skiing or ice fishing, even mountain biking and snowmobiling, things like that. The other nice thing about that from a staffing standpoint is that it's much more predictable and much more low impact. You'd be able to send someone up there when the cabin needed to be cleaned. You check someone in and you could probably, for the most part, forget about them almost from that point forward, and allow them to use that site. The other nice part about that is there's less concern we have for the impacts that might be going on there, because you're probably looking at 10 to 20 people there instead of a couple hundred potentially, and you'd know who was there at all times.
Lauren, there's a question here about the potential number of cabins. Is this?
Yeah, I think that, I think 3 or 4 is probably about the most we'd see there. And they're, they'd be fairly small. I mean, we're not talking about, 3 bedroom, 2 bath kind of a thing. They'd be, I think pretty rustic sort of, couple of bunks, kind of a thing. No bathroom, using the vault toilet. So I think probably 3 or 4. I see Kristen might have 5 on there. So that would be, I think, the absolute outset, but I'm thinking more 3 or 4. Any other questions or thoughts there before we move into interpretation? Okay, I think I have this one too, so I'll just keep rolling through here. And I don't have anything specific to Placid Lake but I think that there's tremendous opportunity for providing additional interpretation all throughout that area, not just at Placid Lake State Park, but on the Nature Conservancy lands as well. And I know the Nature Conservancy folks have been working, especially with some of the tribal partners, on some of these things. And I think there's just great opportunity. This is something I pulled from the Forest Service website, a pretty good interpretive panel here about native prairie. I mentioned the tribal component. This is a panel from part of the ethnogeography project from the Salish Kalispé Culture Committee. They have identified about 1,200 place names and put those together in an atlas and are working to develop interpretive panels to accompany all of these really cool maps that we see here. And Placid Lake was a very important place for those folks, and continues to be for a big segment of their population. So there'd be some opportunity, I think, to increase that awareness and knowledge. And then just when we think about these things, I was at Travelers Rest State Park down in Lolo for many years, and we had a very active education and interpreter program. And, you know, everything from school field trips to junior ranger programs to, I look at that one down in the lower right-hand corner there, and that one just screams for that amphitheater, looking out over Placid Lake and looking toward the snow-capped peaks there in the distance. That's a fellow by the name of Hassan Davis, who did a living history program at Travelers Rest a couple of years ago. Tons of opportunities for better interpretation, better education programming, appealing, I think, not only to families, but to local and regional schools. Placid Lake would give us an awesome opportunity to bring those folks there, be very inclusive. I think some of the work that's been done, not only within the park, but as Steve mentioned early on, with some of the trail work there that is really all abilities access. I think we could do a ton of really, really awesome things there. And so I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on that. Well, I think that might be the end of the slideshow, Vivica. If any folks had other questions or comments or anything, we could do that. And I realize I didn't get the link put on the slide, so I'm going to do that really quickly while we wrap up, and then I can post that and give folks the link that they can use to comment.
Yeah, and on that too, we can also just share the webpage, screen share our webpage. Might be a handy way to just, that's the easiest way to remember right now. If you go to the FWP homepage, there is a link right there to this visioning project, and then that'll be where we collect all the other resources. So this video of this meeting will go on there, and that's where the link is as well to submit those ideas. And then I see we got a question in here. Is there a boat capacity on the lake is the question.
There is not, sorry, I don't know if somebody else is going to answer this. There is not a boat capacity on the lake.
Any other questions or ideas or thoughts? Again, we want to make sure you get your, if you do have ideas, specific things you want considered right now, Warren's about to show you the easiest way to do that. So this is just a screen view of the homepage of the Fish, Wildlife and Parks website. And right there at there's those kind of blocks of kind of current information. And one of those is for this project, wanted your input. And if you just, do you want to click on that, Lauren? Yeah, perfect. And then it takes you to this page and just kind of has the background information on what we're doing. That's where you probably are familiar, because you might have found the link to this very meeting tonight right here. So it's right below that is where you go on and provide your ideas. Just make sure the deadline's May 31st. So you've got all month, but for yourselves or others that you talk to and know are interested, we'll continue to promote this too throughout the month. But this is a great place to direct people. We get those updates every day. We see that information come in, and it'll be a big piece of what kind of helps provide direction to the next step of this process this summer. And I see there's a question, do we have any ATV capacity?
I'm not sure what that is in reference to. Is that in reference to within the park or within TNC lands? I'm not sure what that.
And then, so maybe we'll get a follow-up on that. Pause just a minute, but while we're waiting on that, There's also a question about composting and recycling opportunities as it pertains to decreasing any waste at the park.
So one challenge that we would definitely have with that is bare food storage orders. Specifically, a lot of composting things, food stuff is going to attract bears. So it would be a challenge in a place like Placid. But I will say that statewide, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks has through the years tried recycling in parks at various parks, and it gets to be a all-time consuming challenge. And what that means is the simplest ones that are easiest to do are aluminum cans, beer and pop cans. And when you it attracts bees and hornets because people don't wash out their cans first. So it does attract those. Plus, when people throw in cigarette butts, baby diapers, and other things like that, park staff have to separate that stuff. And we have found at numerous other parks many times through the years that recycling programs just get to be almost too much of a problem, or more of a problem for us. What we've had more success with is working with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to do that. But even that is very limited because just of the nature that recycling is going to attract bears and wasps, hornets, ants, other insects. So it's a big challenge, and I don't see us doing that at Placid anytime soon. I mean, with ideas that we've currently had and utilized in the past.
Yeah, I'll add to that I think that the places that I have seen where that has been successful, and I think Ryan's right on all those points. The places I've seen where it has been successful, it has not been managed by the agency. It has been managed by a volunteer organization that stays very, very involved and is there probably if not daily, then at least every other day, picking up the recycling and taking it away. Just for the reasons that Ryan just pointed out.
And we do have a follow-up to the ATV question, and it was related to capacity on the roads in the area.
So I think that would be probably more of a question for the Forest Service. We don't manage Fish, Wildlife and Parks. We don't manage any of the roads in the area other than the road within the campground itself. And I'm pretty sure the Nature Conservancy isn't managing roads for the most part. Stephen and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong there.
Well, as I understand it, of course, it's a county road leading from the state park to the day roost area. So that's the
Right.
county sheriff would be administering use on there. And then all the other main open roads in that area are Forest Service roads. I mean, the county road starts at the highway and is the lower road going around the north side of the lake and a little bit of the south side of the lake. Most of the other open roads are Forest Service. And to the best of my understanding, to drive an ATV on there, you cannot be a minor. You have to have a driver's license. You have to have lights and registration and a horn on your ATV. I think those are the rules as I understand it. I don't think you have to have blinkers, but you have to use arm signals too. So you have to be essentially like a car.
Yeah, street legal, I think.
Yeah, street legal. There you go. That's the word. That's the word.
Any other questions on anything that we went through tonight? I'm not seeing any, but I'll pause here just to be sure we don't miss anybody.
Yeah.
Vivica, I wanted to just chime in real quick here to thank the folks that showed up. Hopefully I didn't cut that too short. If there's still comments, of course, there's time for them. but just wanted to make myself available. I'm not sure. I tried to look at like a chat thing to put my contact info in there. And I wasn't able to figure out how to do that. I don't know if it's, oh, it's on there. Sweet. It's on the website.
It's on the website.
Thank you. That's perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys. I think that one of the things that we've been struggling with over the years as like land managers, and we're interim landowners looking for permanent conservation solutions here. But working with you all, you know, there's like strengths that different partners have that can help us better manage our ground. And I just really appreciate the approach that you all have taken along with the neighbors to think about how to better manage this ground together, instead of like just, you know, pointing at an issue, and we're actually tackling it. So I appreciate that. So thank you all.
Thanks, Chris. And we did have one other question pop in, and the question is it possible to make a limit to boats on the lake?
That would be, to my knowledge, that would be up to the Fish and Wildlife Commission.
Yeah,
We
I
can't-
believe it would be through a process. There's been no wake rules and things like that that I can think of in somewhat recent history that have gone through that type of process. So it would be something that would go through that and then end up in our boating regulations. I can't think of any relevant examples to limits, but maybe there's something out there I can think of wake regulations and stuff.
Yeah, it'd either wind up either in boating regulations or I think its own arm rule potentially, but that's not a management decision we can just make unilaterally. That would have to be a commission rule.
And there is, I believe, a particular petition process that someone from the public could initiate with. So I would suggest maybe we follow up for that person, just providing a little bit more information on how to get their hands on that information.
Okay, I just one last call for questions, and then again, just a reminder that this webpage, as Lauren showed us, also has contacts. So not only if you is it a spot if you have ideas that you want to submit, it's also a place where you can find information on how to reach out to us just to have further conversation or to ask anything else that maybe comes to mind after we conclude tonight. And then I just want to ask to make sure there's nobody else here from either TNC or FWP staff that had anything else to say before we close.
I just remind people, Vivica, that, you know, that we are very early in this process. And even though we say that, you know, the deadline for comments is May 31st, that's been the comments on just these concepts that we've provided here tonight. And there are going to be other parts of this process, and there'll be plenty of other opportunities for public comment on specific ideas that we roll out. We're just trying to get some feedback on some of these concepts right now. But anything that's more concrete would require us, and we'd be right back out seeking specific comment on those projects.
Just to reiterate the timeline that I shared earlier this evening. So we would get those comments in by the end of May, take time to synthesize them, chew on them, respond to them, and put together a draft vision, a draft strategy that we would put out mid to late summer and get more public comment on that, finalize the vision and strategy after that second round of public comment. And then, as Lauren said, anything that would move forward in a development or infrastructure process would be included with a Montana Environmental Policy Act analysis and environmental analysis. And so there would be an additional public comment, public participation process with that. So there are going to be multiple iterations of this as time goes forward. So just to let you know. But we do appreciate whatever comment you might want to provide formally online in this stage of the process. It really will be useful in informing where we take this in a first round. So thank you very much for your attendance tonight and participation. And my hat's off to all the staff and TNC and FWP who've worked so hard to start initiating this conversation and reaching out to various stakeholders, getting the process going. There's a lot of work in front of us, but we're excited about it and appreciate your partnership. And thank you very much and have a great night.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.